Well, over the last month I have reviewed, rated and completely ripped open the entirety of the Super Star Wars trilogy. Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi have all been covered, plus I've even reviewed the two handheld ports of the latter title. But for the finale of this very special month, we are going back to the beginning to take a look at a game that was not to be. The port of Super Star Wars for the SEGA Mega Drive or Genesis. Even in the early 90s, Star Wars was a very popular license to make games about, and following the success of Super Star Wars on the Super Nintendo, of course it would make perfect sense to bring it over to other systems, and there were a couple of attempts that for one reason or another never came to light. For example, the entire game was ported and even completed for MS-DOS in 1995 by Brainbug, a Danish developer. Now this version is available out there on the internet and is playable the whole way through. But I don't really cover PC games, so it's out of the scope of my usual interest, but it is out there and very easy to find, and it's quite interesting too, with the graphics and audio completely redone. Despite being completed, LucasArts for some reason decided to pull the plug completely on this one. But we're not talking about that version. A couple of years earlier, a console port was planned for the Sega Mega Drive. The development would not be done by Sculpted Software or even another third party. Instead, Sega themselves instructed their own Sega Technical Institute to do the port, and they were certainly capable developers. Headed up at the time by Sony's now lead hardware designer, Mark Cerny, this studio would work on everything from Dick Tracy and Kid Chameleon to Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and 3. The game had been in development from around 1992 to 1993, which times it just after the original Super Nintendo version's release in the summer of 1992. Some magazines gave this proposed Mega Drive port the briefest of mentions around this time, as well as a couple of in-development screenshots, and some mags even suggested the game was coming to the Mega CD, but after that all information on the Sega ports disappeared very soon afterwards. It was only until the website Hidden Palace released a playable prototype ROM on January 1st, 2020 that we really knew how far development had come. They suggested that development ceased sometime in 1993, while the prototype they released is dated January 25th, 1993. Additionally, this prototype has a similar ROM header as Sega Technical Institute's own Green Dog, the Beach Surfer Dude. Now, a ROM header is the first 16 bytes of info in a ROM that holds data about how big the ROM is, what system it's meant for, etc. I'm not an expert, but I don't think that shared ROM header implies much, but it's just an interesting point. Truth be told, this prototype is incredibly bare bones, with just a text menu allowing the player to choose a level or view cutscenes, all accompanied by a very farty rendition of the Star Wars theme. However, the cutscenes don't work, and when you try and select them, you're just taken straight back to the menu. In addition, not all the levels are here, and the ones that are here are in various states of completion. Some are literally just text placeholders. Finally, and some of the levels are separated out into their smaller stages as opposed to being smaller stages as part of a larger level. The player's option lets you pick between Luke as option 1 and Han as option 2, but magazine screenshots suggest that Chewbacca was also playable in this port at some point. Luke's got both his lightsaber and a blaster, but unlike the Super Nintendo version, each attack is assigned its own button. The A button swipes with the lightsaber, while holding B pulls out the blaster, but you need to hold a direction to shoot him with the D-pad. Meanwhile, the C button jumps, and you can do the saber spin jump by holding the D-pad diagonally up while jumping. The slide move is still achieved by holding diagonally down and pressing C. As for Han, he has just a blaster and can do his weird roll move by pressing diagonally down with the D-pad and C. Just as in the original game, there's nothing really special about playing as Han here. As soon as you pick up a pad and start playing, you notice that this definitely feels more like a Mega Drive game. The controls are a lot more sensitive than the Super Nintendo version, and there's definitely more of a looseness here, and it's almost too sensitive really. As this is a prototype, when you pause the game you can press A to go back to the main menu, B brings up some numbers in the top left which seem to mess around with a few things, while C lets you scroll through the level. There's no HUD lit yet, but your character's name is in the top left, and the score is always THX01138, a nod to George Lucas's directorial debut, THX1138. How about a whistle-stop tour of what is here and playable? The Dune Sea is more or less intact from the original game, including the two different sized scorpions, flying enemies, It's arguably the most complete level in this prototype, and the music here is an all-new composition, but it doesn't sound particularly great. Next up is the Sarlacc Pit monster, or rather a empty screen with a sand pit where nothing happens and the boss doesn't actually appear. But at least you have the Cantina theme playing, and it isn't that bad on the ears either, although you will tire of it very soon. A test of the land speeder level is next, and it's basically a land speeder sprite you can control over a shifting horizon with nothing else on it. The music is definitely an original piece, and I thought it was something left over from Green Dog for a minute. It doesn't seem to be the case though, but it is rather funky. The Jawa Sandcrawler exterior is next, and the platforming physics are really messed up here. Because the Sandcrawler is constantly moving, your jump physics are all over the place, and it's just not fun. And here you start to see that the shortcomings of the Mega Drive are definitely apparent visually when compared to the Super Nintendo version. Inside the Sandcrawler is split into 4 sections, and they're more or less intact here. Jawas and Gonk droids are here as they should be, but power-ups are not implemented yet, so they're missing. Part 2 takes you over these spiked areas that start you right back at the beginning when touched, and once you've made your way over those, the weird laser gates are also intact, working, and are just as annoying as they were previously. The droid turrets are also here, and I managed to jump over one and get stuck inside the environment, so there's definitely a lot more work to be done here. The third part of the Sandcrawler interior takes you through this giant enemy, plus a few deadly spike pits and chasms leading up to the boss, where the level just ends. This is because the final part pits you up against the Jawenko boss, who is just a large sprite that you can't seem to hurt, but is able to spit fire at you. Another land speeder section is next, and it's the exact same as the first one, so there's nothing else to say here. The canyon is up next and split into 2 parts. Part 1 is literally about 3 seconds of platforming with 2 enemies before it takes you back to the menu, while part 2 is a platforming area, and you're hindered by both the sensitive controls and the inability to see where your jumps are landing. This is absolutely a level that shows how much polish the controls still need, and this level also ends with a dead end. The Land of the Banthas is very incomplete. The Banthas are here but aren't quite as impressive, nor are there weedy explosive deaths. You just walk to the end of the level and you're back at the menu again. The Land of the Sand People appears to be mostly intact and full of sand people, annoying flying creatures and leaps of faith. Meanwhile, the Womp Rat boss of this level is separated into its own level and is actually defeatable. And I'm not sure if you've noticed, but when you fire your blaster, you don't always see the blaster bolts firing, which is both confusing and weird. Mos Eisley is the next destination and is split into 2 parts that are pretty much complete mostly. The stormtroopers are here and they still fall from the sky in places, as do the occasional barrel, but there's no Chewbacca to be seen at the end of the second part. Onto the Cantina, and as most of the levels in this prototype use the Cantina theme, it's not quite so special here. However, this area does feature pretty much all of the enemies, but they don't look quite as good without all the colours. Once again, the boss of this stage is on its own level, but it's just another animated sprite that can't be killed. Oh well. The escape from Mos Eisley is split into a whopping 4 areas, and it's still as overly long as before. Part 1 is mostly complete but is missing most of the enemies apart from these window snipers, while Part 2 dumps you into this environmental area which you get stuck in and can't get out of. Part 3 takes you down into the horrible area with the metal claws and droids, but thankfully the tiny mines don't appear to have been programmed in yet. And as you probably guessed, Part 4 is the boss of this level, another animated sprite that cannot be killed, and for some reason I ended up disappearing completely here. The Death Star hangar is another complete level, although it's missing the swooping TIE fighters, but thankfully not the silly little droids around the place. Again, the boss is separated out into its own level. It can be destroyed, but it glitches out a bit when you do so. It's as if none of these bosses have their death animations and explosions sorted out yet. The next level, the Princess Leia rescue, is just some placeholder text, and while the detention boss of this level is split out into its own level again, it is literally just the environment and the boss itself isn't even here. However, the tractor beam core level is here and playable. It's here I noticed that the Saber spin jump definitely jumps you way higher than the Super Nintendo version. The level itself is still full of elevators and a long drop, and for some reason this half droid appears every now and then. Meanwhile, the Stormtroopers' Seeker missiles have been programmed in and do seem to come after you. The tractor beam itself is another separated boss and is the last one of this prototype, but it's just a static sprite that does absolutely nothing. And after that disappointment comes more. The final two stages of the game, the previously Mode 7 X-Wing stage and the first person trench run, are both replaced with text placeholders, with one only wondering what could have been. Prototypes are always a mixed bag, and when they appear it's always best to manage your expectations. It's absolutely clear that this game still needed a heap of work. In particular, the controls are especially off. We don't know why this project was cancelled or who made the decision, but it definitely feels like it would have been a much inferior port if it had been released. The visuals are very drab, and what audio exists so far is not great. I wonder if the quality may have fallen short of SEGA Technical Institute standards, or maybe even LucasArts weren't happy with the progress. But despite all of that, it's always interesting to see unreleased games, especially if they're playable, and it took nearly 30 years for this prototype to be released, and who knows, there could be a much more complete version out there somewhere. And that ends Super Star Wars month. Throughout all of May I've been making videos about the Super Star Wars trilogy and it's been a whole lot of fun. There will never be a series of movie licenses quite like these, and I've really enjoyed playing through the entire series and picking it apart. If you've been following the series and watching every video, thank you so much for sticking around. And if you haven't been watching all the way through, well, you have a whole lot of videos to catch up on. I'll see you soon for more gaming greatness. Thanks for watching.